Olive Branch Petition, July 8th, 1775. To the King's most excellent Majesty, most gracious Sovereign, we, your Majesty's faithful subjects, of the colonies, New Hampshire, Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island, and Providence Plantations, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, the counties of Newcastle, Kent, and Sussex, on Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, in behalf of ourselves and the inhabitants of these colonies who have deputed us to represent them in General Congress, entreat your Majesty's gracious attention our humble petition. The union between our mother country and these colonies, and the energy of mild and just government, produced benefits so remarkably important, and afforded such an assurance of their permanency and increase, that the wonder and envy of other nations were excited, while they beheld Great Britain rising to a power the most extraordinary the world had ever known. Her rivals, observing that there was no probability of this happy connection being broken by civil dissensions, and apprehending its future effects, if left any longer undisturbed, resolved to prevent her receiving such continual and formidable accessions of wealth and strength, by checking the growth of these settlements from which they were to be derived. In the prosecution of this attempt, events so unfavorable to the design took place, that every friend to the interests of Great Britain and these colonies entertained pleasing and reasonable expectations of seeing an additional force and extension immediately given to the operations of the Union hitherto experienced, by an enlargement of the dominions of the Crown, and the removal of ancient and warlike enemies to a greater distance. At the conclusion, therefore, of the late war, and advantageous that ever had been carried on by British arms, your loyal colonists having contributed to its success, by such repeated and strenuous exertions as frequently procured them the distinguished approbation of your Majesty, of the late King, and of Parliament, doubted not but that they should be permitted, with the rest of the empire, to share in the blessings of peace, and the emoluments of victory and conquest. While these recent and honorable acknowledgments of their merits remain on record in the journals and acts of that august legislature, the Parliament, undefaced by the imputation or even the suspicion of any offense, they were alarmed by a new system of statutes and regulations adopted for the administration of the colonies, that filled their minds with the most painful fears and jealousies, and, to their inexpressible astonishment, perceived the dangers of a foreign quarrel quickly succeeded by domestic dangers, in their judgment, a more dreadful kind. Nor were their anxieties alleviated by any tendency in this system to promote the welfare of the mother country, for though its effects were more immediately felt by them, yet its influence appeared to be injurious to the commerce and prosperity of Great Britain. We shall decline the ungrateful task of describing the irksome variety of artifices practiced by many of your Majesty's ministers, the delusive pretenses, fruitless terrors, and unavailing severities that have, from time to time, been dealt out by them, in their attempts to execute this impolitic plan, or of tracing, through a series of years past, the progress of the unhappy differences between Great Britain and these colonies, which have flowed from this fatal source. Your Majesty's ministers, persevering in their measures and proceeding to open hostilities for enforcing them, have compelled us to arm in our own defense, and have engaged us in a controversy so peculiarly abhorrent to the affections of your still faithful colonists, that when we consider whom we must oppose in this contest, and if it continues, what may be the consequences, our own particular misfortunes are accounted by us only as parts of your distress. Knowing to what violent resentments and incurable animosities civil discords are apt to exasperate and inflame the contending parties, we think ourselves required by indispensable obligations to Almighty God, to your Majesty, to our fellow subjects, and to ourselves, immediately to use all the means in our power not incompatible with our safety, for stopping the further effusion of blood, and for averting the impending calamities that threaten the British Empire. Thus called upon to address your Majesty on affairs of such moment to America, and probably to all your dominions, we are earnestly desirous of performing this office, with the utmost deference for your Majesty. And we therefore pray that your royal magnanimity and benevolence may take the most favorable construction of our expressions on so uncommon an occasion, could represent in their full force the sentiments that agitate the minds of us, your dutiful subjects. We are persuaded your Majesty would ascribe any seeming deviation from reverence in our language, and even in our conduct, not to any reprehensible intention, but to the impossibility of reconciling the usual appearances of respect, with a just attention to our own preservation against those artful and cruel enemies, who abuse your royal confidence and authority, for the purpose of effecting our destruction. Attached to your Majesty's person, family, and government, with all devotion that principle and affection can aspire, connected with Great Britain by the strongest ties that can unite societies, and deploring every event that tends in any degree to weaken them, we solemnly assure your Majesty that we not only most ardently desire the former harmony between her and these colonies may be restored, but that a concord may be established between them upon so firm a basis as to perpetuate its blessings, uninterrupted by any future dissensions, to succeeding generations in both countries, and to transmit your Majesty's name to posterity, adorned with that signal and lasting glory that has attended the memory of those illustrious personages whose virtues and abilities have extricated states from dangerous convulsions, and by securing happiness to others, have erected the most noble and durable monuments to their own fame. We beg leave further to assure your Majesty that, notwithstanding the sufferings of your loyal colonists, during the course of the present controversy, our breasts remain too tender to regard for the kingdom from which we derive our origin, to request such a reconciliation as might in any manner be inconsistent with her dignity or her welfare. These related as we are to her honor and duty, as well as inclination, induce us to support and advance, and the apprehensions that now oppress our hearts with the unspeakable grief being once removed, your Majesty will find your faithful subjects on this continent ready and willing at all times, as they ever have been, with their lives and fortunes, to assert and maintain the rights and interests of your Majesty and of our mother country. We therefore beseech your Majesty that your royal authority and influence may be graciously interposed and procure us relief from our afflicting fears and jealousies, occasioned by the system before mentioned, and to settle peace through every part of your dominion, with all humility submitting to your Majesty's wise consideration, whether it may not be expedient for facilitating those important purposes, that your Majesty be pleased to direct some mode by which the united applications of your faithful colonists to the throne, in pursuance of their common counsels, may be improved into a happy and permanent reconciliation, and that, in the meantime, measures may be taken for preventing the further destruction of the lives of your Majesty's subjects, and that such statutes as more immediately distress any of your Majesty's colonies may be repealed. For by such arrangements as your Majesty's wisdom can form, for collecting the united sense of your American people, we are convinced your Majesty would receive such satisfactory proofs of the disposition of the colonists towards their sovereign and parent state, that the wished for opportunity would soon be restored to them, of evincing the sincerity of their professions by every testimony of devotion becoming the most dutiful subjects, and the most affectionate colonists, that your Majesty may enjoy a long and prosperous reign, and that your descendants may govern your dominions with honor to themselves and happiness to their subjects, is our sincere and fervent prayer. John Hancock, colony of New Hampshire; John Langdon, colony of Massachusetts Bay; Thomas Cushing, Samuel Adams, John Adams; Robert Treat Paine, colony of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations; Stephen Hopkins, Sam Ward, colony of Connecticut; Elift Dyer, Roger Sherman, Silas Deane, colony of New York; Philip Livingston, Jas Duane, John Alsop, Franz Lewis, John Jay, Robert R. Livingston Jr., Lewis Morris, William Floyd, Henry Wisner; New Jersey, William Livingston, John D. Hart, Richard Smith; Pennsylvania, John Dickinson, Benjamin Franklin, George Ross, James Wilson, Chase Humphreys, Edward Diddle; counties of Newcastle, Kent, and Sussex on Delaware; Kaiser Rodney, Thomas Keene, George Reed; Maryland, Matthew Tillman, Thomas Johnson Jr., W. Paca, Samuel Chase, Thomas Stone; colony of Virginia, Patrick Henry Jr., Richard Henry Lee, Edmund Pendleton, Ben Harrison, Thomas Jefferson; North Carolina, Will Hooper, Joseph Hughes; South Carolina, Henry Middleton, Thomas Lynch, Christ Gadsden, J. Rutledge, and Edward Rutledge. Thank you for listening to the Olive Branch Petition. This was the last attempt that the colonists made in order to secure peace and reconciliation. Right after this petition was launched, King George III sent a declaration of war against the rebellious states. Please contribute to the nonprofit Amending America and check out our website, www.amendingamerica.us. Link is in the description below. Thank you and see you in the next video.